Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I have wanted to read Howl's Moving Castle for a long time, and it's really funny because I feel like a lot of people my age have a very emotional connection to the movie, and I've never seen that movie, nor have I ever seen any Studio Ghibli, which I feel like is really strange for the millennial generation who seem to really love Studio Ghibli. So what I would like to do is I would really like to read Howl's Moving Castle and then watch the movie. Why I say that this is so unusual is that I actually really struggle with adaptations a lot of times and tend to kind of nitpick them. However, I know that the movie of Howl's Moving Castle is so different from the book. And I already know that going in, so that kind of helps me to prepare a bit and help me kind of make some comparisons like artistically and stylistically and talk about my own preferences between the book and the movie. And I really wanted a space to be able to do that because I know a lot of you love the book or love the movie. Some of you love them both. I know several people who love both, but a lot of people tend to prefer one over the other, and sometimes it's based on which one they experienced first. So by reading the book first, I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot by guaranteeing that I'm gonna love the book more, but I'm really excited to give it a try. It sounds so whimsical and lovely and exactly what I want to be reading right now. So I will check in a little bit with my thoughts on the book, and then I'll watch the movie and check in with my thoughts on the movie and let you know my thoughts overall on both. Hello, my friends. Let's talk about Howl's Moving Castle because I have finished the book. I've not yet watched the movie, and I purposely wanted to take some time to come on here and talk about what I thought about the book before I watch the movie so I can get my thoughts out and I don't get anything kind of like muddled between the two of them. Although from what I've heard, they're super different. So I don't know how. I don't know if like the movie's gonna be, my guess is it's gonna be a little bit more romance heavy and a little bit more maybe, I was gonna say dark, but because this feels like really fluffy, there are moments of darkness, but it's not that dark. So anyways, I really did enjoy this book. I thought it was very immersive, and I thought that Diana Wynne Jones did like an amazing job of just establishing the magic, establishing this fantasy world, but pulling in some real world elements as well, like the fact that Howl is actually from Wales and his name is Howl, and then he changes his name to Howl as a wizard, which I thought was really funny. I legitimately loved every single character in this book. I felt like they were really enjoyable and lots of fun to be around. I know lots of people probably don't like Howl because he's not always like the nicest, but I just thought he was funny, and I thought that he was just kind of like one of those kind of people that they put on this facade of not caring, but they actually care a whole lot, and they're not as vain and self-centered as they would have you believe. It's a facade that they put up to kind of like protect themselves, although when you kind of find out like the contract that is happening between Calcifer and Howl, you kind of also understand some of what's going on with Howl and the way that he behaves as well. So anyways, what ends up happening in the story, which you would know if you're watching this and you've already read this, you want to know my thoughts, but essentially when Sophie comes into Howl's castle as an old woman, she wants to have a fake job to remain there because she makes a deal with Calcifer, who is like this fire in the grate, and he's like a fire demon is what they call him. And she makes a deal with him because he has a contract going on with Howl that if she can figure out what the contract is and break that contract, that he will then help her to break the spell that the Witch of the Waste has put on her to make her look and feel like an old woman. So they have this deal going, so Sophie needs some sort of facade to remain there, and so she says like, well, I'm your new housekeeper. And so she starts cleaning this like disgusting place, which looks like the inside of a regular house because it is. It's actually Howl's house in Wales with a totally different outward appearance in these other areas. And it's just like there's so many details that are so fun. Like I really love the fact that there's a doorknob with 4 colors on like 4 parts of it. And depending on what color is up depends on where you go. So there's 4 different locations that this door can open to, which is just super interesting. We also find out that Sophie has some magical abilities of her own, which you come to suspect like while she's still working at the hat shop for her stepmother. So that was not surprising to me at all. And I saw a lot of the plot twists coming. I still couldn't exactly figure out what the tie between Calcifer and Howl was. So I figured out kind of like what Calcifer really was, because he's called a fire demon, but he's kind of something else. And I figured that out, but I didn't know what the deal was that they made and how they were bound together so closely. I have a couple of complaints that kept it from being perfect for me. The first one is like there's like a romance aspect to it at the very end, where all of a sudden like Howl and Sophie realize that they're like in love with each other very abruptly, having had nothing else to lead to that before, which is why I think that the movie's gonna lean harder into the romance aspect, because I feel like that was something that the book did not do well, because you don't really sense any sort of romantic tension between them. Like Hal knows that Sophie is under a curse, but she doesn't know that he knows that she is. So he knows she's not an old woman, but it seems like he cares about her, but like in a friendship sort of way, the same way that he cares for Calcifer and that he cares for Michael, not the way that he cares for these women he's trying to woo, which, to be fair, he's not really in love with any of the women that he's trying to woo. But it doesn't seem like Sophie's in love with him either. It seems like she cares about him the same way that she cares about Calcifer, the same way that she cares about Michael, the same way that she cares about her sisters. Like, it seems like she cares about him as a human being, but not in love with him. And so there's one point where he realizes kind of what's going on with the Witch of the Waste and kind of what's going on with her fire demon and all that kind of thing. And he's like, I thought that you would be jealous, and so you would not let this thing into the house. I was counting on you being jealous, but you're actually too nice of a person. And I was like, why would she be jealous? Like, she doesn't seem like she's in love. And then at the end, when everything is fine and everyone's trying to talk to them, Hal and Sophie are just holding hands and staring at each other and are like, oh my gosh, we're in love. And I'm like, it just felt like it came out of left field. So I didn't love that element. All that to say, love the book. Such a great time reading it. The humor was fantastic. I thought that the plotting was great. I thought that like the magic system being as like developed and explained in certain ways as it was, it's not like super explained because it is very magical, but like the way that just like the world was built and different things are established is so fun. There's lots of really fun twists and turns that I think that kids are really going to enjoy. There's a really strong sense of place and of family and found family and friendships that I've really just loved. So honestly, this was like a near perfect book for me. Anyway, so I've been told that the movie is very, very different. And normally that's something I'm quite nitpicky about, especially if I've recently read the book. But I'm going into it kind of looking at it as a different entity, especially because this is a Japanese anime movie as opposed to a British book. So they're going to feel totally different culturally, especially the fact that Howl actually is from like the real world, like our real world, like he's from Wales. So I'm not really sure if that's going to be an element at all in the movie. And that was something I really liked about the book. So we'll kind of see where that goes. I do hope that the movie kind of builds up more of like a romantic tension between Sophie and Hal, because then I think that the ending will be much more enjoyable. I've seen pictures of Calcifer and he looks so much cuter than I would imagine him to look in the book. Like in the book, I don't think he sounds all that cute. In fact, while I read most of this physically, I did listen to some of it on audio, and my audiobook cover has a picture of Hal and Calcifer looks in my brain like kind of almost like the magic mirror of like Snow White, kind of like this creepy face kind of a thing, which is so different than how the movie portrays him. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to be. I polled on Instagram asking people which they preferred, and I also talked to my husband's cousin because she is a huge Studio Ghibli fan and really encouraged me to watch the movies, especially this one. And so I talked to them and asked them if they preferred the original Japanese with subtitles or if they liked the English dubs. And initially it was like a landslide of people telling me that they preferred the English dubs, which the English dubs is like a star-studded cast. So I'm sure that they did a great job, but sometimes dubs can just be kind of cheesy and weird. So I was just like not sure, but everyone has been assuring me that the English dubs are actually super well done by Studio Ghibli. But when I checked the poll this morning, now it's almost divided in half in terms of whether or not people prefer the English dubbed version or the original Japanese with subtitles. So I don't know what to do now. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to watch both of them because I have to pay to rent it. So I'm not going to pay to rent both of them. So I don't know. I'll keep you updated on what I end up doing. I'm kind of leaning towards the English dub because I think that that's what most people have the nostalgic attachment to, that most people grew up watching the English dub and loving it. Really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to the score because my daughter is currently learning Merry-Go-Round of Life on the piano. And so I'm looking forward to actually hearing that in the movie and being able to pick it out. But again, I have no nostalgic attachment to this movie or to this book, but I loved the book. So I'm really hoping that I love the movie as much despite not having any nostalgic attachment. Well, I did it. I watched the movie of Howl's Moving Castle, and I'm here to tell you my thoughts, kind of how the two compare in my opinion, which one I like better, etc. So talking about the movie itself, it is really different from the book, which I was already prepared for. Lots of people had told me that. And there are elements that I think that the movie does better and elements that I think the movie doesn't do as well. I was kind of wondering what kind of vibe I was going to get from it. And I feel like the book has like a really like whimsical and cozy vibe. And I think that there are a lot of people who think that the movie has that same kind of vibe, but it didn't for me. It actually felt a lot more strange to me than the book just because of some of the ways that Studio Ghibli decided to represent some of the visual components, and it was either not at all how I imagined it or it just was very different in a way that felt a little bit like off the wall to me. I think that the movie feels like it could be set in a real place for some of it. We've got trains, we've got cars, we have lots of like modern technology that exists in our world that is existing in the movie, which is not the case in the books. Like the books feel like it's very like this fairy tale world, and the movie does not feel that way to me. Obviously there are things, if you've seen the movie, that absolutely do not exist in our world, particularly with like the magic and all of that kind of stuff. But if you were to remove the magic from it, it would feel like a place that could exist now or within the past 100 years or something like that, as opposed to the book, which feels fairy tale-esque even without the magic elements. I think one of the biggest changes is Howl's character. I think that Howl is a lot more likable in the movie right off the cuff than he is in the books, because in the books you have all this kind of rumors about him, and there's a little bit of rumors in the movie. Some of them are even the same, but they're very much glossed over. In addition, although Howl has a bit of a reputation in the movie, he's not actively a womanizer like he is in the books, where he's obsessed with a woman until she starts falling in love with him, and then he wants nothing to do with her anymore. And he doesn't seem nearly as vain in the movie as he does in the book. So while he's more likable in the movie, I do still think that like his motivations are a little bit less clear in the movie, and then why he wants to do the things that he's doing and all those kinds of things. I feel like they're a little bit more clear in the book than they are in the movie. Also, the whole thing with Howl turning into a monster was really interesting, like this bird and the transformation, that if you keep transforming into this, then soon you won't be able to transform back into a human. And that is something that is an element in the books, but not for Howl. Howl's not transforming into any animals. There's like a dog that's in love with one of Sophie's sisters that's actually a man, and he keeps turning into a dog, and he's struggling to turn back into a man. But I think that he also had a curse put on him, so there's that element as well. Another huge change that we have is the war that is existing within this kingdom, well, several kingdoms. And I think that the war is actually a really good way to explore some of the plot points that are there in a much more simplistic way. I'm not saying that the movie of Howl's Moving Castle is really simple, because it's not. But when you take a book that's hundreds of pages long and you're trying to condense it within a certain time frame and maybe you don't have time to explore some of like the dynamics of what's happening, the way that Studio Ghibli used the war as the crux for what is happening with all of these things, I think was really well done and actually made a lot of sense, and I really liked that. We also have a massive villain shift as well, where it's no longer the Witch of the Waste who's actually evil, though you think that she is, because you see her place this curse on Sophie at the beginning and stuff. But I loved the Witch of the Waste character in this movie. It ended up her just becoming family along with Michael, who's Markle in the movie, and Calcifer and Hal and Sophie. And so I loved her character. Like, she was good comic relief, but I just loved her in general. I loved what they did with her as a character and explored kind of like her broken heart and how that affected the way that she behaved. But she was not the villain. It was someone totally different, so it took a very different direction than the book did in that sense. But I think within the context, again, of this being a war, being the crux of what's pushing things forward, I think that that made more sense. If they're having the war being kind of like this big thing that's looming over everyone's heads, the way that they orchestrated who was the villain in the movie made a lot more sense than if they had tried to stick to the original storyline of who is actually the villain. I thought it was kind of strange, the choice to not really clearly have Sophie capable of any magic. Like, maybe she is capable of some, but it's really not very clear. Where in the book, you realize like immediately that with her speaking to things, she's endowing them with magical powers. With her hats, you realize that at the beginning, and then her essentially speaking this scarecrow kind of like into life and just different things like that. Like, that is very present in the book. And so we realize as a reader before Sophie does that she has magic. And in the movie, I didn't feel like that was really all that clear at all. I think you see a lot more of her kindness towards Hal, towards Markle, towards Calcifer, towards the Witch of the Waste, towards Turnip Head, which was the scarecrow. And so it seems like her kindness and her giving of herself to others is far more magical than any sort of magical power. I kind of liked it better, I think, when Sophie was more magical, but I actually liked her relationship with Turnip Head in this, with the scarecrow, because in the book, she's terrified of him because she doesn't know how he came to life. She doesn't realize that she did it. She doesn't understand that he's actually someone who is cursed, and she doesn't realize it in the movie until the end either. But I thought it was hilarious that Sophie's like his true love, and the Witch of the Waste is like, oh, your true love's in love with someone else. I thought that was really funny, because that's something that you see in a lot of movies with like a true love's kiss breaking a spell. But what if someone is someone that you're truly in love with, but they're not actually in love with you back? So that was just like a little tiny thing in there that wasn't a point, but I just thought it was funny. They also made Michael into a little boy in this movie, which works really well for the found family element, because she's very much like mothering to him because he thinks that she's like a grandma and essentially treats her like his grandma. However, I don't think it makes as much sense to have little boy Michael be a magical apprentice to Howl, because Howl leaves for days on end and leaves this little child by himself, and it makes a lot more sense if it's a young adult. Plus, I really like the dynamic of Michael with Sophie's sister and Hal with Sophie's other sister. Like, I just thought that was fun. I really think that Sophie's real family plays barely any role in this movie at all. And in the book, they play a really big role. Like, they are very present in a lot of it. And a lot of the things that Sophie does and the decisions that she makes has to do with her actual family. I do think that the romance makes more sense in the movie than it did in the book, and you can see that Hal knows that Sophie is under a curse, whereas in the book you don't really know that he knows that until we get closer to the end. But in the movie, they did a really good job of portraying that he can see that she's under a curse, and he can see what she really looks like and who she really is. And so I think that was portrayed well, and the romance itself was really sweet. The ending was so good. The ending really won me over, even though elements of it were very different from the book. I still think, like, I really did like it. I thought that visually it was stunning. The music is incredible. Like, it really is like masterfully animated. I did end up renting the English dubbed version, and I think it was really well done. I really don't regret my decision to do that. I think that they chose an excellent voice cast. I don't know, I liked Christian Bale as Howl, but Howl is like super pretty in the movie, prettier than I would have pictured him in the book, and so I'm not sure how I feel about Christian Bale's voice. I still think he did an excellent job, but I'm not sure that I feel like his voice really suited Howl as much as everyone else in the cast, but I still did think it was really well cast. I think the English dubs looked great. It didn't look like it was super out of sync or feel really weird like English dubs sometimes do. So ultimately, I really liked the movie. In fact, one of my biggest complaints about the book, that the romance kind of came out of left field, the movie did that way better. So what are my final thoughts here? I really liked the movie, but I loved the book. To me, the book really outshines the movie in a lot of ways, except for the romance. I feel like if there had been no romance at the end of the book, it might have actually been a perfect book for me. But overall, I felt like the book felt more whimsical, felt more fun. I really liked the world more. I felt like it was more fleshed out and more enjoyable, and I think I liked Sophie more as a character in the book, although in the movie I liked the Witch of the Waste and Howl better than I liked them in the book. So there's trade-offs here. The fact that the movie is so different from the book means that it did do things better, because I did have some complaints about the book, but overall I think that the book was a more magical and enjoyable experience for me, although like I said, I really did still like the movie. I'd love to hear from you if you've read the book and watched the movie, or you've just done one or the other. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about the book, and I've never heard anyone say anything bad about the movie, and I think that that's valid, because I think that they're both really good and are masterful in their own ways. And I'm so glad that I finally watched a Studio Ghibli movie, because I think that it was just so fun and such a great experience. Anyway, this was really fun, and I really enjoyed comparing the two, especially going in and knowing that they were different. Helped me to be a lot less nitpicky than I normally am. So it was really fun, and if you have any other suggestions of book to movie adaptations that you'd like to see me do this with, I'm totally open to suggestions. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again.